Let me just get everything.
Gauri can do the intro now.
Yeah, Pushkar, I'll do the intro, then I'll
Sure,
stop
please.
sharing, and then you can start. You
Absolutely.
can share your screen. Okay.
Gauri, you can start.
Good evening, everybody. From the Tamil Heritage Trust, a very warm welcome to all of you for the September 2025 edition of our monthly talk series. Maratha architecture or Maratha buildings have been recently in spotlight owing to the UNESCO certification of the Maratha military landscapes as World Heritage Sites. This renewed interest has also made us realize that Maratha buildings are not merely remnants of the past, but living markers of our continued cultural continuity and identity. The story of Marathas is largely told through politics, through rapid campaigns, battles, fragile alliances, and the sudden rise of this new dynasty in the Deccan. However, when we look at the architectural history, we find that what we get is a far more slower and subtler rhythm. Within Maratha architecture, there is no sudden break with the past. In fact, there is no breakage or rupture at all. What we actually have is a tapestry of continuum, where the traditions from the Mughal, Sultanate, and the regional lineages have been absorbed, assembled, amalgamated, and reinvented to suit the new requirements of defense, rituals, and domestic life. In fact, the Maratha building legacy makes us realize that political histories can change and are rewritten overnight and largely dictated by battles and dynasties. On the other hand, architectural histories rarely ever change like that. In fact, they almost never change, or they merely evolve by absorbing the traditions of the various dynasties that rule them and then adapting the same to create a unique identity of their own. To delve deeper into this topic and to analyze it from various angles, we have with us today architect Pushkar Sohoni from IISER Pune. Through his talk titled From the Sultanates to the Mughals, Continuities in Maratha Architecture, he will be bringing in a professional insight and exploring the complex interplay of the political and cultural identities of the Marathas in this region. A very warm welcome to you, Pushkar. Before we move on to the main program, let me just give you a brief introduction about Tamil Heritage Trust, which is our organization. Tamil Heritage Trust or Tamil Paramparya Arakattalai is a voluntary organization started almost 15 years back by a group of like-minded people with the objective of understanding, appreciating, disseminating, and celebrating information related to India's rich heritage and history, not just for the academic or the erudite and scholarly, but the average enthusiastic public as well. Towards this end, THT conducts programs and events throughout the year. Chief amongst these are our talks and seminars. Our main program is this monthly Heritage Talk series, and we are extremely proud to say that we have conducted this program almost uninterrupted for 14 years now, merely changing the platform from in-person to online through and post-corona. Apart from this, we have two dedicated seminars which we conduct every year. The first is an in-person event in Tamil called Pechu Kacheri, conducted over 2 days in December to coincide with the Margari Isai Kacheris of Chennai. The other is a more erudite and scholarly event called Indology Festival, which we conduct in June. This is an online event across 6 days with 12 lectures by scholars. Apart from the talks and seminars, at THT, we also conduct regular workshops. We have one-day workshops called How Sam, which is how to see a museum, and we just conducted one session of this in June. And How Sat, which is how to see a temple, and a session of this was conducted last month. Both of them had very good participation from the normal public, around 30 plus participants in each. Apart from this, we conduct classroom sessions on and off on a variety of topics like Pallava Grantham, ancient Indian mathematics and astronomy, etc., which are for the public, and another event called Alamar Avai, which targets the school teachers of Tamil Nadu. Study tours is another concept which we are promoting, and we have one called Malay Study Tour, which is coming up in the 3rd week of this month. This will be a 1.5 day workshop comprising of lectures and field visits. Anybody who is interested can register for the same. Docent training is another initiative of ours where a training is given to prepare docents so that they can present historical sites and heritage monuments in a professional manner to the audience. Docent Training 3 has commenced from today. Then site seminar is another initiative of ours, which is largely meant for self-education and self-enhancement. We narrow in upon a particular site in India and our volunteers study the same in depth. And we have a number of in-house seminars. And then armed with all this knowledge, we visit the place and experience it in totality. Apart from this, we have also instituted 2 awards from THT. The first is named after our co-founder and called Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award. This is given for individual contributions in the field of heritage and history. We are extremely happy to say that the winner of year 2025 is Falak Chowdhury from Bombay, an independent heritage enthusiast and a lecturer in history. The award ceremony is going to be on September 13th, and the presentation will be followed by her lecture titled Mumbai Through My Lens. I invite all of you, those of you who can, to attend this event in person at Mylapore and the others to log in and watch the same through the net. The other award that we give is called V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award and is given for individual contributions in the field of Indian epigraphy. Named after V. Venkaya, who was the first official Indian epigraphist, this award has been instituted by his great-granddaughter, Sunita Madhavan. THT has been entrusted with the responsibility of administering this award. The award function for this was held in July, and senior epigraphist Professor Srinivas V. Padigar from Karnataka was the winner this year. We have a dedicated YouTube channel where you will find links to all our past talks right till today's talk. Kindly subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications of our future events. These are our social media handles, and this is our mailing address. You can mail us here to join our mailing list, or if you want to associate with us in any of our events in a voluntary capacity. And then we are a voluntary organization. We do not have any dedicated financial backing, so any kind of contributions are welcome. You may use this QR code or ID to contribute generously, and the same will be appreciated. Moving over to today's talk, as I already mentioned, the independent Maratha kingdom of Chhatrapati Shivaji was founded in the mid-17th century when the Sultanates of the Deccan were defending against the expansionist Mughal Empire. Over the next half-century, the Marathas consolidated their gains with building campaigns. Through their building legacy, we realize that political histories do not neatly map onto architectural histories. Maratha architecture embodies both adaptation and inheritance, defensive needs of a new power balanced with cultural memory stretching back centuries. To explore these continuities is to see how architecture resists rupture, offering a bridge between political change, and enduring ways of life. And delving into this topic with us today is architect Pushkar Sohoni. Pushkar Sohoni is a historian of architecture and material culture at IISER Pune. His scholarship illuminates the rich interplay of art, society, and identity across South Asia, particularly the Deccan. A PhD from the University of Pennsylvania and a background in architecture have helped him to decipher how buildings, coins, scripts, and landscapes function as powerful, often underexplored historical texts. Once again, a very warm welcome to you, Pushkar. Without further delay, I invite you to take over the screen and deliver your lecture.
Uh, Thank you very much for that kind and generous introduction. I hope I live up to some of the promise that you have set forth. But let me start off with the presentation without a lot of delay. And so today I will be talking about continuities in Maratha architecture. Is the screen being shared yet?
We can see it.
You can see it, right? Because on the YouTube channel, I think there is a delay. In any case, today I will be talking of continuities in Maratha architecture from the Sultanates to the Mughals, talking about how the language of architecture uh, basically is a language of power. And anybody who comes to power will try and copy whatever has been successful before them. So you see a lot of princely states in the 19th and 20th centuries will incorporate English architectural elements because those represent power to them. You also have in and across most of the Indian subcontinent, people emulating the Mughals in the 18th century after the Mughals have stopped being an important power. And it's because Mughal architecture represents political power of certain kind, and it gives you a template, a model for how buildings should look for people to accept those as expressions of political power. So let us start with who the Marathas are. Now, the Marathas are an ethnic group. It's also a caste group. There is a lot of political mobilization around it right now. But the Marathas, as a political force, emerge in the middle of the 17th century, from the 1650s onwards, under the leadership of somebody we recognize as a person who wants to set up his own Swaraj or his own kingdom. This is Chhatrapati Shivaji, uh, who basically starts off by conquering a few forts and has control over a small stretch of coastal areas and hills in present day Maharashtra. And this is the small kingdom from where it all begins. And his big legacy is that he's able to ward off any kind of Mughal incursions into his territories, in fact, defeating them on multiple occasions. And he has carved out this kingdom from two sultanates that exist before him. And there's a complicated relationship of the Marathas with these various sultanates, and we'll come to that shortly. But very quickly after, what you see on the map on the left is the Mughal Empire, which is yellow, which will eventually come and expand under Aurangzeb into a lot of the Deccan. Aurangzeb in 1686-87 will annex the kingdoms of Bijapur and Golconda, extending his empire even further into the peninsula. And the Marathas really are small at that point, which is still that coastal strip of land. But within less than 60, 70 years, they've taken over most of north and central India. And in fact, they will make raids into places as far away as Afghanistan. They will demand revenues from places like Odisha and West Bengal as well. How does this happen? Why does this happen? Why does this, uh, power of the Marathas expand very quickly? All these answers have to do with a certain kind of political history. It's the vacuum left behind by the Mughals after the death of Aurangzeb. But let us also take a step back and see where these Marathas emerge from. And they emerge from what you see on top there. It's the Bahmani kingdom. The Bahmani kingdom, and to the south, you have the Vijayanagar kingdom, have a lot of small feudal vassals, typically called Rajas, sometimes known as Nayakas, particularly in the case of Vijayanagar. And so, just like you have the Nayakas in Tamil country, you do have various kinds of Rajas, and these are mostly Marathas in the Bahmani kingdom. And we do have good documentary evidence of the presence of these families who will serve various sultanates, including the Delhi Sultanate, but also the Bahmanis. And later on, they will support the Adil Shahs of Bijapur and the Nizam Shahs of Ahmednagar. You will find this ethnic group called the Marathas very dominant at both these courts. We know this from a number of documents that you have both from the Nizam Shahi court and the Adil Shahi court. And these are documents that are bilingual, typically with Persian and Marathi in the Modi script. And they have to be bilingual because uh, most of the people understand Marathi and not Persian. And these kinds of uh, letters also talk about how complicated the history between Persian and Marathi is, where at one point about 40% of the vocabulary in Marathi is derived from Arabic or Persian. So let's start off with the founder of the Maratha Swarajya, the Maratha Empire, Chhatrapati Shivaji. Very few pictures of him done, just during or after his lifetime, almost all of them European. His grandfathers, uh, both on his father's side and his mother's side, were actually very important military nobles at the court of the Nizam Shahs of Ahmednagar. So you take Chhatrapati Shivaji's father's father, who serves the Nizam Shahi court of Ahmednagar, and you take his mother's father, who also serves at the court of Ahmednagar, and you start looking at Nizam Shahi, the Sultanate records, what you realize is that they're powerful people at court. They get all kinds of honors. In fact, Shivaji's father will do his best to keep up the dynasty when it's under invasion from the Mughals. And this is the first instance we have of identifiably Maratha architecture. Tombs that are built in the early 17th century. I wouldn't call them tombs, really, samadhis or memorials that are built in memory of these two grandfathers of his. On the left-hand side, you have the paternal grandfather's um, samadhi, and on the right-hand side, you have the maternal grandfather's samadhi. At first sight, they will appear to be completely Islamic buildings. And that's because both these court nobles are serving the sultanates, and the only architectural language of power they know is the Sultanate architectural language, and they will emulate it wholeheartedly. His maternal grandfather actually has a fief at Sindkhet Raja, a village in, well, now it's a larger town in Buldana district in Maharashtra, where they leave behind several, uh, you know, monuments and sites, including a fort. But interestingly, his maternal grandfather also is credited with building dams for the town. And these dams have chambers inside where one can sit and enjoy the water as it flows out through the sluices in the dam. And this is something, if you look at the architecture, it's completely Sultanate with the vaulting, with the pendentives in the corners, with all the architectural features. And this is very similar to what the Adil Shahs are doing at the same time at their fort in Naldur, where they, of course, build a much bigger dam. But that dam also has chambers inside which you sit and watch waterfalls flow over and under. Um, and other kinds of buildings that are built by Shivaji's maternal grandfather are pavilions like this in some of the artificial water bodies that are constructed, pavilions that can only be accessed by boat. And again, there is a Sultanate precedent for this. You see this with the Imad Shahs of Birar, you see it with the Nizam Shahs of Ahmednagar. This is high fashion in the 16th century, where people are constructing these kinds of pavilions in the middle of artificial water bodies uh, as pleasure pavilions, pleasure palaces. And so you look at the tomb of Lakhuji Jadhav, who is the maternal grandfather of Chhatrapati Shivaji. You look at the kinds of buildings he's building, and it's all borrowing very heavily from Sultanate architecture. Again, the actual residence of Lakhuji Jadhav Rao and also the site where Shivaji's mother is born is in this town of Sindkhed Raja, and it's a big fortified mansion. And inside it, you start seeing various kinds of buildings, various kinds of features, including this little loggia that is set in one of the walls. And again, if you start looking at the details of this wooden structure, which has been recently refurbished, what you see are incredible similarities with the Sultanate world around this time. And so, very clearly, the models for architecture are being derived from the Sultanates. And it's no surprise because everybody is working for the Sultanates. Ahmad Nizam Shah uh, is the founder of the Nizam Shahi dynasty, and he's the only Nizam Shahi king who has a tomb built in his honor because his son converts to Shia Islam. And from then onwards, all the dynasty members have their bodies embalmed and sent off to Karbala in Iraq. This is the only tomb that survives. But tombs at that point in time are very important markers of power. And what you see is both these people, though they will not be buried, they will be cremated, build for themselves these kinds of memorials. On the left, the maternal grandfather, Lakhuji Jadhav. On the right, the paternal grandfather, Maloji Bhonsle, at Verul, which is Ellora, and that is the fief given to the Bhonsles by the Nizam Shahi court. Let's quickly look at the Samadhi that's built to Lakhuji Jadhav. Again, at first glance, very Islamic, till you get close up and start seeing that there are all kinds of animate things also represented there in the decoration. And around the main tomb, you have a number of small tombs of family members. And it's almost like Lakhuji Jadhav's presence is going to radiate outwards a kind of energy, and all the lesser members of the family around it are going to benefit from it. This is a pattern seen in Sufi dargahs, where everybody wants to get buried close to the Sufi saint uh, to receive his barakat, because the Sufi saint is guaranteed a place in heaven. And so if you are buried close to him, chances of you getting in are also good. So this idea that a memorial to a dead person somehow radiates some kind of power and lesser members of the clan are buried around it is a very Islamic idea, but it's taken up wholeheartedly by Hindu families who are serving the Sultanates, and the Marathas, again, are no exception to the rule. Again, you look at the small memorial shrines themselves, and they're very reminiscent of tomb structures in Islamic Sultanate context. In fact, a lot of the decorative motifs, such as those little flowers you see supported on fish brackets, are something the Sultanates will use a lot. These are all markers of royalty that get used. When you come close to the tomb of Lakhuji, the memorial of Lakhuji Jadhav himself, you will start seeing there is the reuse of certain kinds of kirti mukhas and certain kinds of sculptures reused from temples that are in the vicinity. But you start seeing clear markers of royalty, such as, again, on the bottom right, you have those fish supporting those flowers in the spandrels. All this you will see on Adil Shahi buildings as well. And what you see on the left is that the corner of the building is supported by what looks like the legs of a stool. And this is an absolute marker of royalty that gets used everywhere across the Deccan Sultanates. And so on the left, you have something in Bijapur, where you'll see similar kinds of motifs, particularly a flower or a bell hanging from a chain. And there are parallels in almost all the monumental buildings of Bijapur and Ahmednagar. There is another branch of this Jadhav family at a place nearby called Deolgaon Raja. And there again, you have a memorial built for one of the women of their family. And if one did not know, one could easily be mistaken into thinking that this is an Islamic tomb. Again, you look at those footstool-like legs that suggests a ruler or nobility. And again, you look at the proportions, they're very similar to things you have in the kingdom of Bijapur. Next, we'll quickly look at the paternal grandfather, Maloji Bhonsle's samadhi at Ellora. And again, no different from how Muslim tombs are being built. The details are stunningly similar to things you will find in Bijapur. And around it are other tombs. We don't know whose they are, but it follows the same pattern as we've seen at Sindkhed Raja. One main monument and a number of memorials and tombs around it. Again, what you see on the right are the motifs and the decorations, which are the same for all royalty. Again, you'll start seeing a pattern emerging here. And so you have lots of tombs and memorials all across the plains of Khuldabad, which is very close to Ellora. And you'll see it's impossible to tell what's Muslim and what's Hindu in many of these cases. They borrow elements directly from tomb building practices elsewhere, such as in Khandesh at Thalner. Again, just to give you a sense of the kind of decoration that exists, it's impossible to tell whether this is a Hindu building or a Muslim building. This is part of that architecture of power that is shared by everyone. And in this case, the white spots you see are the three tombs, and what anchors them is the Krishneshwar temple, one of the Jyotirlingas, which is in the village that Maloji inherits. He's gifted it by the Nizam Shah. He carries out a Jirnodhara or a rejuvenation of this temple, and then his samadhi is located close to it, as are other memorial buildings. And so that is the kind of pre-Shivaji Maratha architecture that we know of, which we can firmly attribute to Maratha nobility at the Nizam Shahi court. And it's very Islamic. And then when Shivaji is getting coronated, he commissions a temple called Jagdishwara at his capital of Raigad. And you look at this temple, it's unlike any of the classical temples. You basically have two cubes, one of which is the sanctum, the other is the mandapa in front. And on top, you have a roof line that is punctuated by various minarets and a dome in over the shrine. And the mass is very similar to the kind of buildings you have again under the Sultanates. This is the gatehouse to Ibrahim Raza. Even the flooring patterns are very similar to what you might see at Bijapur. And of course, on top of the temple, instead of a shikhara, which is what one expects, what you see is a dome and minarets. And over the entrance, the lintel has, of course, a Ganesha, but on top of the Ganesha, you have an arabesque screen, and then on two sides, you have two minarets that proclaim the entrance. And if you look at the base of those minarets, you have those footstool-like decorations again, suggesting that this is a royal commission. It's not that in Shivaji's time, people did not know how to build these kinds of temples. This is a shrine that's right next to the Jagdishwara temple. These are choices being made. And the choice being made is because it represents a certain kind of power. So you look at early Maratha temples. This is when Shivaji is a young child in Pune. There's a temple called Someshwar Bari, heavily restored and redone now. But we do have an old photograph. And what you see is the same kind of massing, two stone cubes, one being the sanctum, one being the mandapa in front. And then on top, you have a series of little chhatris, that is kiosks and domes. Uh, and of course, these are slightly later domes, but this is what you have throughout this period. Very Sultanate architecture. And till about 1700, this will persist. You see it at the town of Jejuri in Pune district again. Again, a historic town patronized by the Maratha community right since the 15th century. It's been built over and over again. There's a bustling modern town around it now, but it really used to be standalone. And you see the actual temple building. And what you have is a domed building with minarets marking the sanctum. What you have in front are the Dweep Malas, a very characteristic Maratha feature. There are stambhas on which lamps are lit. But what you see on the right is really borrowing from a vocabulary, a mixed vocabulary of various places. The Sultanates, Mughals, and even elements from Dravida temples. So this is the temple of Jejuri. It's undergone continuous renovation for 300-400 years. So one really has to peel back the layers to understand what belongs to what period. But again, it represents all phases in which the architecture of power was replicated for a temple. Now, there's something very interesting that happens I think I skipped that slide, is it? Chhatrapati Shivaji dies in 1680. His son Sambhaji rules for 10 years till 1690 or 1689, when he's captured and executed by Aurangzeb. And Aurangzeb takes captive Sambhaji's son called Shahu and raises him up at court in Delhi and Agra and also in his camp. And so this young Prince Shahu has grown up in a completely Mughal milieu. And in 1707, when Aurangzeb dies, he is released. And when he is released, he comes back as a claimant to the Maratha throne, which already is occupied by another branch of the Bhosle family. And there is a small civil war in which he is victorious and he appoints a Peshwa, somebody called Balaji Vishwanath Bhatt, who then manages to secure from the Mughal emperor in Delhi 2 farmans that confirm that the Marathas are authorized to collect taxes in the Deccan, and they are doing this on behalf of the Mughal emperor in Delhi. Shahu is very cognizant of his power as a nominal vassal of the Mughal emperor. And this status of his is in line with the kind of upbringing he's had. And we'll start seeing under his reign, and then as the Peshwas eventually will take over power, that a number of things that get built now start following Mughal fashion more than Sultanate fashion. Because Mughal fashion is new, your source of legitimacy or source of authority is really deriving from the Mughals, and so that is what you're going to emulate. And importantly, as the Marathas are making excursions and incursions into central India and North India, they're coming back with architectural ideas from things that they see there. So till about 1700, Maratha architecture seems to follow the architecture of the Deccan Sultanates. From 1700s onwards, it starts following Mughal patterns. Temple called Bhuleshwar, we know this, built in the 1730s. Again, very inspired by elements that are Mughal, of course, composed very differently. Same site of Bhuleshwar, you start seeing, again, buildings that are more inspired by Islamic architecture of North India than anything else. You have some remnants of a Sultanate visual culture, such as these kinds of bulbous fluted domes with a ring of petals on the base, something you might have seen in Bijapur, Golconda, or Ahmednagar. But of course, it's blown up, and the acanthus pattern that's at the base of this dome is completely drawing upon the Mughals. And there are also other attempts at recreating historical temples. And one of the things people are constantly trying to do is replicate historical temples which, under the Yadavas, were built in a style called the Bhumija style, except nobody really knows how it's built. And so you have all kinds of awkward attempts to build temples like this. This is at a place called Karmala. So the elements, the individual elements are all Mughals, but the way it is composed tries to mimic their understanding of Yadava temples. They also are making inroads into the south in Karnataka at this point in the 1760s, 70s, and ideas like Gopuras also show up in many of their temple sites. This is the slide I was looking for. So this is the rough timeline where after 1712, you have the rule of Shahu along with his Peshwa, and then the Peshwas from the second Peshwa onwards will start becoming more and more powerful. But even for them, as their empire is expanding, the architecture of political power is Mughal architecture, and they emulate it. In fact, Nana Sahib Peshwa, the third of the uh, uh, Peshwas who rule, has a letter in which he talks about the beauty of North India, how the rivers are nice, the land is nice, everything is much better there. And it's very clear they are completely enamored of things that they're seeing up north. Then they start building temples which are in a style that eventually will be known as the Maratha style. It's temples like this at Sangameshwar, where if you look at the shikhar on top, of course, you still have a Sultanate dome, but all those little edicules and kiosks that you see are completely borrowing from Mughal Bangla chhatris. Uh, Again, not only do you have a dome right on top, but all those small edicules also have domes on them. This does not follow any kind of classical proportion. It's not in the lineage of medieval temples. This is a completely new invented language in which the elements are Mughals. This curvilinear roof, which is called the Bangla or Bangladar roof, is something the Mughals will pick up in Bengal, take it to Delhi, and it becomes part of their imperial language, and the Marathas will pick up on it. Again, some Sultanate elements like these domes will survive. This is actually a temple. Uh, and then this fleur-de-lis pattern that you'll see it in Agra, you'll see it at the Taj, you'll see it almost on every Mughal monument, and it gets picked up and replicated on Maratha temples. And this is the temple we were just looking at. This is a guru of the Chhatrapatis of Satara and also of the Peshwas, somebody called Brahmendra Swami, who basically donates enormous amounts of money for the upkeep, restoration of temples, and also builds some temples in his life, including a temple which is his own, which is his Samadhi temple, eventually finished by Chhatrapati Shahu. And the temple now borrows Mughal elements extraordinarily. In fact, even the painting that survives on the temple is a painting style called Abashi painting in Marathi. And it really comes from this color that gets used, this deep maroon, which in Persian is called the Gule Abbas, and in Marathi it becomes Abashi. And you have a lot of painting that clearly has Iranian antecedents in this temple. Again, you look at all kinds of geometrical patterns, things that you will find. So you look at the bottom, it pretends to be older by copying things that you might see in classical temples. But again, the moldings also have no logic. It's just decorative at this point. But what you have on top is an extraordinary assembly of Mughal architectural forms. Again, these kinds of geometric jalis. It's really a mishmash. The fleur-de-lis at the bottom, very poorly resolved and worked out details. And this is Brahmendra Swami himself. as a statue inside the temple. Again, these cantoning pilasters, these kinds of baluster forms are all completely drawing from a Mughal source. The Parvati temple, sorry, bad picture. Again, temple spire with a dome and minarets. The architecture is all completely borrowing from the Sultanates and also in bits and pieces from the Mughals. And you'll really find these kinds of temples. Look at the multifoil arch on the Nandi Mandapa. Uh, Look at the domes on top. Look at the decoration. Look at the curvilinear chhatris or kiosks. All this is a Mughal vocabulary. This is something that is indigenous and homegrown. And you look inside and you have basically domes being put on square rooms with squinching in the corners. Again, all technologies and forms from an Islamic context. In the late 18th century, the Marathas also built a lot of ghats. And this kind of temple shape really becomes popular, where all you have is small kutas or small kiosks being arranged in tiers. This logic is like a Kutina temple. This logic is that of a South Indian temple, where you have multi-stories of small kutas and shalas. These ghats are phenomenal. They are full of temples, many of them abandoned and ruined now, but they all follow the same logic. Two cubes at the bottom representing the mandapa and the garbhagriha, and on top you have a multi-storied palace made up of small edicules. And each of these edicules, each of these kiosks is borrowing completely from a Mughal vocabulary. Look at the columns, they are Mughal columns. You look at the arches, they are Mughal arches. Um, Again, it's clear that the aspiration is to be like the Mughals. Some of these temples are extraordinary, like the Omkareshwar temple in Pune. And this is fantastic because what you have is that the plan of the temple is a series of 9 domes, and the central dome will rise higher and then it will have a dome on top. So, this is what the plan of the temple looks like. You see those 9 squares, and this is a very common 9-bay plan that emerges in bulk in Afghanistan in the 10th century. This is a plan for a plan type called the 9-bay mosque. It very quickly spreads to Toledo in Spain. You find it all across the Islamic world. Uh, this is what the plan is in essence, and this is what you see at the temple of Omkareshwar. This is the old mosque from Balkh from the 10th century where this plan is seen. And you compare this with Omkareshwar, and it's almost absolutely the same. This is the Tarikhi Mosque in Balkh. The same 9-bay plan is used to create a building type called the Baradari. It's basically a pavilion, either on the roof of a building or it's set in a garden. And it's called a Baradari because a 9-bay plan results in 12 doors if all sides are open. And this is actually a building that used to be the pavilion from where Aurangzeb would give Jharoka Darshan or appear in the window for his troops uh, towards the end of his life. It's a place close to Ahmednagar. And so these prototypes do exist in Maharashtra. Very late in the 18th century, you have temples like this being built. This is a temple in Aurangabad city at a small place called Satara. And you look at the ceiling, which is all carved in red and black sandstone. And what it mimics are, again, decorative patterns of the Mughals. The border has cartouches. In the middle, you have this woven pattern, which is very similar to decoration you'll see on the Bibi Ka Maqbara. And of course, the top all gets built in brick, where the bottom is all built in stone, something that really happens very commonly under the late Marathas. And so, architecturally, if one has to talk of styles that the Marathas built in, First, there is the Sultanate style, which they all copy. But for religious architecture, they seem to have shortlisted a few things they're going to do. They try to build in the Bhumija style in a couple of places, like at Krishneshwar near Ellora, but it's quite rare. Uh, Again, they don't know how it's built. This becomes a mishmash. It tries to mimic the Bhumija, never does it quite so clearly. Then, as they're conquering North India, they keep getting temple builders from Central and North India, where the Jains have been building these Shekhari temples. And so, on older sites like Trambakeshwar or Bhima Shankar, this one, the Peshwas will sponsor temples that are in this North Indian style, an area that they're conquering. Again, it represents a certain kind of power, and therefore you replicate those temples in your own domains. On the ghats of Nasik is a temple called the Naroshankar temple, which is also built in this style. So you can see the temple spire on the left, the mandapa in front. But what is funny is what encloses it is a Mughal garden wall. So walled garden would very often have these corners with these kinds of curved roofs and that big Bangla roof in the middle marking the entrance. So here you have a Mughal garden wall enclosing a North Indian revival temple. And then, of course, you have the Maratha style, which is, this kind of South Indian logic of having a multi-storied palace, each with little kutas. It is the Kutina style, but all the individual elements are all borrowing from the Mughals, these curvilinear roofs, these small domes, these minarets. And you see this ad nauseum across Maharashtra for all temples built in this period, whether it's temples that are a single story high in the Shikhara or they are multi-stories high. They will all follow the same logic. Sometimes the plans are circular, sometimes they're square, but it's essentially the same logic. But each of those individual elements is something you recognize from Mughal architecture. And so even into the 18th, 19th century, you start seeing these kinds of temples. Now, these temples are being built by Peshwa Sardars like the Patwardhans of Sangli and Miraj. And this is a temple you have in Sangli, which is a Ganesh temple. The Patwardhans have made inroads into South India and they've seen Gopurams and they've brought back the Gopuram form for the entrances to this temple. But the temple itself is very curious because it has this kind of plan, the sanctum in the middle, 4 rooms in the corner, and then 4 porches. 3 of the porches don't even go into the sanctum. They just face outside or access small rooms. And this is a plan type that you have from Central Asia, which the Mughals will also use, called the Hasht Bihisht plan, in which you have a central chamber, you have 4 chambers in 4 corners, and you have in between these open spaces. So if you go to Ajmer and look at the palace that Akbar builds, it's the same plan. A central space, 4 corners have 4 chambers, and in between you have 4 porches. And in fact, you look at Humayun's tomb, you look at the Taj, you look at most monumental Mughal buildings, and they will have this Hush Bihisht plan or the plan of 8 paradises. And it's called that because what you have is the central chamber, which houses a divinity, a deity, sometimes a tomb, and around it are 8 spaces. And this plan is surprisingly used in this temple at Tasgaon, actually, close to Sangli. Again, examples of the Hush Bihisht plan at the level of a building, at the level of an entire garden. You start seeing it everywhere. And the Marathas will continue to build samadhis for themselves. This is in Pune now. Somebody called Pilaji Jadhav, who's a very important military commander, is building for himself a samadhi. And all the small princely states of the Marathas will also build for themselves memorials and samadhis, borrowing on a completely Mughal vocabulary. The state of Fulton Again, you will see a few Sultanate elements, a lot of Mughal elements in all these. The Bhosles of Nagpur. Again, the temple spires on top, if you remove them, these are Mughal pavilions at the bottom, including the Baradari. Even the decoration, a lot of it is inspired by Mughal decoration, particularly the ornamental bands. Indore, the Holkars, again, this is so derivative of Mughal architecture. Again, these kinds of memorials being built, these kinds of chhatris. And this, of course, I mean, some of it is from the 19th century. So all kinds of depictions have changed. Guns have become commonplace. In fact, so much so that you have Mughal elements mixed with British elements. And here is an example of amorous couples, uh, one of which clearly has some kind of European connection. But you look at those trees that frame the couple, those slender trees. Uh, Again, those are like Mughal columns. There are Mughal columns on the outside. And as European influence, particularly British, will increase through the 19th century, you start getting European elements in the architecture of the Marathas. So here at Dhar, again, a Baroque gable. And inside you have a mixture of things that are European and Mughal, not so much Sultanate. So those little round windows you have above the colonnade on the side is very European. You don't really have that before. Some of the windows, right? This is all, the columns are late Mughal, the arches are late Mughal, but the windows are looking at European Baroque models mixed with Mughal architecture. And again, this is what the samadhis look like. This is the Samadhi temple of Mahatji Shinde, who ruled from Gwalior for many years. And the temple part, again, is a Maratha revival temple, but the hall in front is completely a mishmash of European and Mughal elements. And the original memorial is like an Islamic tomb. And I don't know if I have the time, but what I would quickly talk of is how it's not only about political power, sometimes it's also about religious power and authority that architecture straddles. So Muharram is a very big festival in 18th and 19th century all across India. And though we associate it with Shia belief, it's actually a kind of almost a secular festival because everybody is participating. It's a big uh, spectacle and procession patronized by everybody. The Holkars, the Shindes, the Gaikwads, the Peshwas in Pune, in North India, every princely state will have their own taziyas. The idea originally was that you are supposed to represent in procession uh, the uh, tomb or the coffin of Hussein, who was martyred at the Battle of Karbala. But over time, it has taken on all kinds of local flavors. So in Iran, for example, this big teardrop shaped thing is taken out in procession. In Singapore, it becomes this kind of small South Indian shrine, a Tamil shrine, uh, on a chariot, like in a temple. But this is Muharram. I mean, sorry, this is similar to Muharram processions. This is what it is supposed to be, a model of. But this is what you start seeing in the Deccan. You start seeing these shapes being used. And we know descriptions of several of these where the Peshwa comes out, he sponsors one tabut, various nobles will sponsor things, and then they're all taken out in procession. And in fact, today's Ganesh Chaturdashi and this Ganesh festival is also, in a sense, modeled on the Muharram procession as a way of politically mobilizing Hindus. But look at the kinds of shrines that are being taken out. And then in Bombay, they are immersed uh, in the sea. In Pune, they are immersed in the water. This is what the models look like. We, again, have good visual evidence of several of these. And one can't help but notice the parallels between the Maratha temple building style and these kinds of processions. So on the left, you have the temple at Parvati. On the top right, you have a photograph. On the bottom right, you have an engraving of a Muharram procession. And just like architecture cuts across political regimes, it also completely cuts across religious lines. What it represents is some kind of power. In the case of the Sultanates and the Mughals, it represented political powers. In the case of temples and taziyas, it represents a divine power of some kind. And so I'll stop there and really be happy to take questions. But the idea is that we think of the Marathas as a certain political force. We think of the Mughals as a political force. We think of the Sultanates. But in terms of a visual culture, it's all shared. Everybody understands what power means in pretty much the same terms at any given period and time. So thank you.
Thank you. That was really insightful. And at least I realized that we hardly knew anything about Maratha architecture beyond the forts. So whatever we saw today was all completely new. And so we are quite brimming with questions. And there are quite a few questions from YouTube also.
Please.
So if we can get started. My first question is from Kishore Mahadevan. He wants to know that could the Sultanate influence on the architecture also be attributed to the aesthetics of the artisans of that region? Because the Stapatis, the builders, the actual people who are building are probably already used to the Sultanate elements or Sultanate way of doing things. Could that be directly translated onto this?
He's absolutely right in that, whenever one group starts patronizing a lot, that becomes the regional idiom. So you have this in several cases where your patronage eventually starts dictating the regional style. So if the Sultanates have been asking artisans to make things in a certain way, that becomes their craft. Now, one has to realize that artisanal styles are slow to change. People can have aspirations of design. Designs are very quick to change. But how people make things with their hand takes a few generations. It doesn't happen overnight.
But as a follow-up of this is my question. Even though they have emulated the so-called Sultanate elements or Mughal elements, I find a curious lack of proportions or aesthetic sense in almost all their buildings. I mean, what is the reason for that? Is it that they had no time to evolve the architecture, or is it something to do with the materials? I mean, were they they quickly wanted to put up their power symbols there? Whereas Mughals probably took their own time to evolve that style of architecture,
See, the Mughals ruled from 1526 to, nominally 1857. A few hundred years is where you see an evolution over time, various things as they conquer various provinces. The Mughals learn from these provinces and make it part of their style. So when they take over Gujarat, they learn about the use of jalis as walls, and they will implement this in the tomb of Salim Chishti. From Bengal, they will take the Bangladar roof. From the Central Indian Rajput kingdoms, they will take various kinds of brackets and balconies. And so every province they conquer will give them more things to process and incorporate. So Ebba Koch has argued that the baluster column actually comes from Europe in Mughal architecture, or that pietra dura, this stone inlay, possibly also comes from Florence. So they are
But
really
whatever elements they borrowed, they kind of imbued it with a lot of overall sense of aesthetics, and they incorporated it to get a cohesive whole, which is completely kind of lacking in
right.
the Maratha buildings.
And so you're absorbing one element every 30 years. The Marathas are just taking I mean, remember from 1720 when they start having this resurgent power, uh, till 1804 when they start losing it. I mean, in 1820 it's all over. So in 100 years, everything's happening too fast. Expediency is the key. Again, you are exposed to a lot of new things. You want it all. And you're right, it's not resolved at all. I mean, there are very awkward connections, junctions. Uh, there are all kinds of unresolved issues in a lot of this Maratha architecture.
Actually, then one question from Ramesh Gauri Raghavan to elaborate it on it a little. See, the Marathas were Hindu and they were kind of stridently Hindu as opposed to Islamic. So, did they not leave behind any clues to their Hinduness in their shrines? I mean, did they not feel the need for it?
Well, I think, I mean, any kind of figural imagery uh,
Hmm.
immediately proclaims the place as Hindu. So not only the idol that is enshrined inside, but having a few statues outside. But again, you don't need to declare your Hinduness with the building so much as the activities that get performed in there, and also in these small symbols, a bell hanging, a Nandi outside, a Deepmala, uh, those all become markers. The architecture is largely borrowed or derivative.
Okay. Now, Badri Seshadri wants to know that if a new temple is built in Maharashtra today, what style would it be in? I mean, just to elaborate, in Tamil Nadu, even if you have a small roadside Ganesha or an Amman temple, it is distinctly in Dravidian architecture. The so-called Shat Angas are in place and, overall proportions and things are maintained. So,
Yeah.
hmm,
So Tamil Nadu, of course, like Gujarat, has had a continuous tradition of temple builders.
hmm,
Uh, and therefore you have regional styles that survive.
hmm.
Maharashtra, very funnily, has managed to borrow from everywhere and not build up its own traditions. So nowadays you get temples that are where the shikhara is built completely in concrete. In fact, it's cast in concrete.
Hmm.
And the contractor will show you an album of different spires and he'll say, which one do you want? And they have the formwork. They cast it in concrete, they'll put it on top. But again, if you want to have let's say a Tamil community wants to build a temple, they are going to get their own sthapatis. A Jain community is going to get their own, uh,
Okay.
artisanal
Hmm.
communities.
Yeah.
And so, depending on the patrons, it changes. For somebody who is here, I think it's not an artisanal temple anymore. It's this kind of uh, quick concrete, or sometimes it's completely innovative, like the temple built by Narendra Dengle and Kanvinde,
Hmm.
uh, which
Okay.
mimics a traditional form, but the technology is completely
Yeah.
different.
That is true of modern temples in Tamil Nadu also. You have a sthapati, but of course, modern materials are being used. Or even if stone is being used, machine is being used to lathe and everything to carve and get the
So
shape. But
I saw extensive restoration and repair works at one of the temples on the Nasik Ghats,
hmm.
and all the artisans were using power tools, and all of them were from Tamil Nadu.
Oh. But what I'm saying is there is something called the basic agamas in Tamil
Yeah,
Nadu, which is
no,
probably totally absent in the Maratha style of temple building. They just decided and went ahead and built what they
yeah,
wanted to, whoever is sponsoring, isn't it? Yeah. So, in the same way, what Badri wants to know is, were they not aware of Ellora, which was so close by, and the beautiful temples there? How come they didn't borrow anything from there? Because one thing in Ellora is the proportions and aesthetics is uniformly
but
in place, irrespective of the scale. Like,
yeah. So the Kailasa temple, of course, is a Dravidian style temple. There is no doubt about it.
hmm,
It basically tries to rival the Pallava temple at Kanchi,
hmm,
the Kailasnatha temple. Ellora is visible. Ellora, in fact, is one of the only sites in India which has a continuous set of descriptions for over 1,000 years. Every century you have descriptions, so it's never a lost site.
Just a minute. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think, is there some problem with the connection? They are saying that there is no connection. Just 1 second. I'll just find out.
Now it's okay. Now
It's
it's
okay.
okay.
Okay, fine.
There was a period where it got affected.
My connection or
I
Pushkar's?
don't know, but we are now okay.
Okay, carry.
So Ellora is a site which has never been lost for over 1,000 years. It's been described in every century. There are Arab travelers in the 9th, 10th centuries, even Mughal emperors, various sultans. Everybody describes it. The English describe it, and the Marathas also are very well aware of it. So, but I think it doesn't represent in the 17th century an architecture of political power, which is what everybody. You want to do the latest thing.
Okay. I understand. Yeah. Okay. And another thing is that, see, while there has been evolution in terms of adding more elements and borrowing, their basic plan seems to have more or less remained the same. 2 squares, maximum that square with 9 or whatever. Unlike Vijayanagara, if you see, their idea of evolution and growth was to add more and more mandapas for more and more activities and, increase the temple larger and larger in size, etc. That seems to be curiously absent here. I mean, could we take it that the Marathas didn't really use the temple as a place to draw, to draw Hindus? If you see Tamil Nadu, temple was a focus where, especially in the Vijayanagara times, they drew people to the temples. That was one way of unifying the religion, or unifying the people. That was probably not there in the concept of Marathas.
No, because in these forms of kingship, whether it's at Vijayanagar or whether it's with the Pallavas or the Cholas, what you find is that particular shrines are very connected with kingship. To be a ruler of that dynasty, there is a shrine. I mean, it's almost like a palace with a different king. And there is a connection between the divine king and the earthly king. And this kind of relationship doesn't exist with the Peshwas, and with the Chhatrapatis also. They have multiple deities. So the goddess Bhavani at Tulzapur is an important one. But and so is this place, Shikhar Shingnapur. But really, you don't have this kind of daily ritual of the king being implicated in the daily ritual life of a temple.
In fact, I was just going to come to that. Who were their main deities? And did they have any distinct identity for the different deities, like in terms of their temples?
Yeah, so the ruling family of the Bhonsles had their own tutelary deities, like the goddess Bhavani. The Peshwas had their own tutelary deity in the form of Ganesh. But again, there was no specific historical temple in which their daily schedule was wrapped up. So there is no daily connect in that sense. It's not like Hampi, where the king, ritually at least once a week will go to the Virupaksha temple or.
And at the times of all the rituals, the king is very much present there to watch the activities, etc. As I told you, temple was a focus or a point where they united the people to show them that, they are one country and the king is their ruler or whatever. Especially during turbulent times when they wanted to unite and present Hindu as a religion. So they used
temple. And Maratha ruler in Tamil Nadu, in Tanjavur, Sarfoji II, does this with the Tanjavur temple, Brihadeshwara. Where he stages plays and he becomes very central to the life of that temple.
Actually, in their building activity, did they also undertake any kind of rebuilding or renovation of earlier temples?
Yes. And this is a theme that's so recurrent. I mean, you have it from the 11th, 12th century. You have a constant rebuilding of temples. And it's very difficult to tell which is from what period in many cases. But yes, in a sense, the era of big temples by the ruler is gone by big rulers. So the Yadavas will build a massive temple at a place near Nasik called Sinnar, this temple of Gondeshwar, a massive temple. But this kind of big royal temple disappears later, and what you have are small ruling families over small regions
Okay.
building much smaller temples. So if they have a big temple in their fiefdom, they might restore it to some degree.
Okay.
But again,
But they restored it in their own style, or
yeah,
that is what I wanted
in
to
the
know.
new way.
Because to a great extent, just as the Dravidian architecture has got its own agamas, etc., the Nagari architecture of the north also followed very strict agamas and had their rule of proportions and everything. When you said that they were so enamored of things in the North India, it's a little surprising that they never took to adapting those texts or anything like that.
No, no. So they do, like I said, at established older sites like the Jyotirlinga sites of Bhimashankar
Mm,
or Trambakeshwar uh, or even uh, this one, Krishneshwara,
mm.
they will try to have revival styles. So two of them are done in the North Indian Shekhri style,
Oh,
which is actually proportionate. The
okay.
third one is sponsored by Ahilyabai Holkar, and
Mm,
it's attempted to be Bhumija. But
mm.
of course, by that time, the Bhumija style is organically dead.
Oh,
Nothing in Bhumija is built after the 14th century,
mm.
and therefore nobody really knows what the
Okay.
proportions are or how it's to be done. But the North Indian tradition, like Ahilyabai's temple at Maheshwar,
Mm,
is completely in that Shekhri tradition. So are
mm.
these older sites. Uh, but new sites demand new architecture. Just like
Okay.
you know, movie theaters are a new thing in the 1930s, and Art Deco is a new thing in the 1930s, and so they're both used together.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Another thing was, of course, through your photographs, we didn't see too much of sculptures, but did they have sculptures in their temples, and did they have any specific sculptural style for their temples?
No, I mean you start seeing sculptures quite late, and that is again borrowing from Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Malwa.
Okay.
So these very chunky, blocky sculptures, uh, not the old Chalukya or Yadava
Mm,
sculpture. Um,
okay. Yeah. Lastly, I mean, we looked at the temple architecture, but they also have left a huge
yeah.
plethora of forts and things. No? What kind of architecture did they use there? I mean, did they have a different identity, or was it
So
largely to do with spatial planning and less to do with elements? Because
no, so
they were.
forts are special in the sense they're really uh, trying to keep up with advances in artillery. Because if you have good guns, you can blow down a wall. And so, till the 17th century, they try to keep up with artillery. After which, it's impossible because the guns keep getting better, and there's only so much you can do in terms of walls. And so, the first thing the Marathas do is they retreat to hill forts where artillery cannot reach you. So, it's a completely different kind of strategy. And these on the ground forts are understood as really ceremonial and symbolic more than defensive. So they'll keep out bands of robbers, they'll keep out dacoits. But if a big army with artillery is going to come, at city wall or fort wall is no good.
Oh,
And so in the 18th century, they really are more symbolic and against local threats than big armies. And in the 19th century, I think artillery gets so good uh, the British are even able to, take down Maratha forts which are on hilltops from below. And by the mid 19th century, fort walls all across uh, India are being demolished. So even British forts like Fort in Bombay, it's completely dismantled in the 1860s because at that point fortification is useless. So already from the 17th century, unless you have the Maratha strategy of having forts on top of hills, forts on the ground are quite easy to breach. About domestic architecture, the Marathas built extensively in wood,
okay.
and that's because it can be built very quickly. Uh, you assemble a framework, you make filler walls, uh, and a lot of it is not very high quality construction in terms of durability.
Okay.
Most of these buildings last only a few hundred years.
Okay.
So they're quickly being replaced everywhere. The royal ones, of course, will be slightly better, but in general, this is not that kind of stone architecture. It is.
But did they have any innovations in planning? Like Mughals definitely had a very distinct style of planning
Yeah.
in
The
terms of
Maratha domestic architecture uses a lot of local woods, and so they decide on modules which are roughly 10 feet by 10 feet. Everything is made in that grid.
okay.
And there are certain spatial arrangements of courtyards, of staircases, which are very common.
Okay.
But I mean, again, a part of it is universal. There is an outer courtyard, which is the office, the inner courtyard, which is domestic. Uh, uh, Spaces are not only separated by who has ritual access to what, but also by gender. Uh,
Why
Usually,
I'm saying is because in Tamil Nadu, if you see, most of our forts or palaces have not really survived. So it is very difficult for us to say what
but
type of palace
but
architecture were followed by the
I
kings.
think
So,
a lot of palaces generally in the south were built in wood. I
hmm.
mean,
Or bricks.
the exceptional survivals are the Tirumala Nayaka's palace in Tanjavur again, or uh,
Senji Fort.
Shinji Fort, yes.
So, yeah. Okay. Lastly, I just want to ask one more last question from Ramesh Gauri Raghavan. Is the reverse also true? Did Muslims also at any time borrow Hinduist elements in their architecture? And are there examples of the same?
Of course, I think, again, like I said, craft changes very slowly. So, for example, when the first wave of, um, patrons
Islam buildings.
who are a part of that political Islam come in, these sultans from Delhi, they ask local artisans a lot of times to make things, and the people will only do it in the way that they know best.
Hmm.
So, for
Actually,
example,
that's true of Fatehpur Sikri also, that there
yeah,
are lots of places there where the jalis and elements are very distinctly Hindu. So,
or I wouldn't even say Hindu, it's local. For the
ah.
artisan, it's not Hindu or
But it
Muslim.
is the kudos to the Mughals that they integrated it and gave it all a very refined Mughal chapa, so to say that,
No,
you
but
know.
I mean, I think one has to realize that even today, if you uh, tell a Rajasthani carpenter to make a furniture item from an IKEA catalog,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, the patron is one thing, the design is yet another, and the artisan comes from a third
Yeah.
tradition.
Yes, that is true.
And you always have certain kinds of odd details and
Yeah. Yeah,
things that will tell you it's not IKEA, it's not from Madras, and it's not from Rajasthan.
yeah, that is true. That is, yeah, that is, yeah. Yeah. I think that about wraps up all our questions. And thank you so much for an insightful talk on a topic about which at least we were not particularly aware in South India. It's quite new to us. And
Glad you enjoyed
yeah,
it. Thank you.
and because it's a topical, Maratha architecture is so much in the news right now. We are very extremely happy to know quite a lot about it. Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Just before we close, I'll just like to
Yeah. All right, I'll leave.
yeah, thank you so much. One second. Yeah, before I close, just a gentle reminder to all our viewers that the Malay study tour is THT's Malay study tour is scheduled barely 2 weeks later, third weekend of September on 21st and 22nd, where there will be a workshop and a field visit, and where our experts will be explaining the monuments of Malay to the participants. So anybody who's interested may kindly register. The registrations are still open. And the THT Swaminathan Award function is scheduled for the next Saturday, barely 6 days away. And the presentation will be followed by the award-winning lecture Through My Lens. And the winner this year is Falak Chaudhary. Anybody who can participate in person, kindly attend the event at RK Center, Mylapore. And all the others kindly log in and listen to the event. With that, thank you very much to all of you who joined us today. Look forward to seeing you in our monthly lecture next month.